Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. 60 days until the midterm elections, and danger threatens Donald Trump's presidency from both within and without, including tonight a report that his private business empire, the thing that defines him above all else, is in the crosshairs of a federal probe. Inside the White House, the president and his closest aides are reportedly turning the West Wing upside down to try and identify that senior official who wrote the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, claiming to be part of an internal resistance within the Trump administration, protecting the country from an unfit president. Asked by a reporter if he thinks the attorney general should investigate who wrote it, the president responded that he does, claiming the op-ed is a matter of national security. The reporter did not ask which law the president thinks was broken. And after issuing denials yesterday, administration officials are now going the extra mile to proclaim their innocence. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley publishing a signed op-ed in the Washington Post, and economic advisor Kevin Hassett throwing down the gauntlet.
If the New York Times, if you're listening, if someone told you I wrote the piece, then you're allowed to announce that publicly, that I forgive you of any the confidentiality agreement you might have thought you had with the purported Kevin Hassett, because it's totally not me.
Now, there's an idea. Maybe the president should challenge every single one of the officials who issued statements yesterday to follow suit. But all those underlings deriding him behind his back as an unstable, malignant fool are the least of the president's worries. They are not the ones investigating him for obstruction of justice and conspiracy with a foreign power to win the White House. As negotiations over a presidential interview with Robert Mueller drag on, the president now sounds a lot less eager to face the special counsel than he used to.
You and Rudy are saying you're not willing to answer questions to Mueller about obstruction. Doesn't it send the message that you're hiding something?
David, number one, there is no obstruction.
So why not testify and say it?
Because everybody that looked at anybody over there, they get him on some kind of a lie. I see Papadopoulos today. I don't know Papadopoulos. I don't know him. I saw him sitting in one picture at a table with me. That's the only thing I know about him. I don't know him. But they got him on, I guess, a couple of lies is what they're saying.
Well, a couple of lies. What's the big deal? Speaking of George Papadopoulos, a former Trump campaign aide, did appear in court today to be sentenced for, indeed, lying to investigators about his contacts with Russia-linked individuals during the campaign. And his lawyer made a pretty extraordinary argument, according to reporters in the courtroom, that the president of the United States hindered the investigation far more than the lawyer's client by launching a fake news campaign and calling the probe a witch hunt. The judge may have found that convincing. Papadopoulos was sentenced to just 2 weeks behind bars. He's the first of the felons close to the president to be sentenced to prison, though Paul Manafort has been locked up since breaking the terms of his bail, accused of attempted witness tampering. Meanwhile, the grand jury in the Mueller probe was meeting in that very same courthouse today, where far-right conspiracy theorist Jerome Corsi was subpoenaed to appear. An ally of longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone, Corsi has told InfoWars, run by Alex Jones, that he would like to fight the special counsel.
I want to say to Mueller, let's go out in the backyard of the Justice Department. You got to have let's duke it out. I mean, you want to behave like a thug? You want to behave like that? Well, this is what you deserve.
Okay. Today, after his lawyer said he planned to cooperate with Mueller's subpoena, Corsi was a no-show. Another associate of Roger Stone's did appear before the grand jury. The man he's called his back channel to WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, radio personality Randy Credico, accompanied by his emotional support dog, Bianca.
Very little. No, don't. The majority of the questioning had to do with Roger Stone. Specific questions we're not going to get into.
God bless lawyers. Now, Credico is the latest in a long line of witnesses connected to Roger Stone to testify for the grand jury or to be interviewed by Mueller's team. And it's another sign that the special counsel may be closing in on the president's longtime ally and advisor. And if that were not enough to fan the flames of the president's paranoia, tonight there's this. A single-source report that federal prosecutors in New York did not end their investigation with Michael Cohen's guilty plea, but rather are now examining whether executives at the Trump Organization violated campaign finance laws. To help break down the astonishing number of legal threats circling the president, I'm joined by Nancy Gertner, a retired federal judge in the District Court of Massachusetts, and Harry Litman, former U.S. attorney and former deputy assistant attorney general. Nancy, let me start with you as a former federal judge. A lot of people trying to make sense of this sentence today. 14 days for what George Papadopoulos pled to. What do you think of it?
Well, the guidelines, the plea guidelines were between probation and 6 months, which is about as low a sentence as one could get and still be a felony under the federal guidelines. So I don't think it means anything except that the judge saw a 29-year-old or a younger man who seemed to be showing remorse, and the government really wasn't pressing. Government didn't say anything with respect to probation in 6 months. So I think that they just saw it. The judge would have just seen this as, you know, the kid is showing remorse. Some time was necessary, but I don't think it has any significance beyond that. It was really a relatively minor plea agreement.
So, Harry, let's talk about the Credico, Corsi, and Roger Stone part of this. It has seemed clear for a while that Mueller is zeroing in on Stone. Stone himself has said he expects to be indicted. Credico today saying the majority of the questions at that grand jury, Roger Stone. My question to you, having worked in the Justice Department, do you think today, which is 60 days to the midterm, do you think this idea that the Justice Department can't bring anything within that 60-day window applies to something they would do against Roger Stone?
No. The short answer is no. I mean, you know, there's no, as we've learned from Giuliani's false assertions before, there's no strict policy, and even the guidelines such as it exists has to do with the direct effect on an election. I think the argument is stronger that indicting Stone doesn't have a direct effect on any particular election, though it's not good news for Trump. Now, we do know that when Mueller proffered his list of questions to Trump, it included things specifically about Stone, and Stone has bragged about his relationship and prior knowledge with both WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. So this indictment, if it comes, could actually bring what has been activity across the Atlantic, the GRU computer hacking indictment in particular, onto our shores and very close to Trump.
Yeah, I mean, from the Trump perspective, I mean, the indictments that have been on the Russian side, the conspiracy to sort of tilt the election, sabotage the election that the Mueller team has offered of Russians, if Stone were indicted in connection with that, again, if that were the indictment, that would be an enormous deal, right, Nancy? I mean, that would be
right. That
seismic.
Would be the link.
Right.
That would be I mean, Stone and to a much lesser degree Papadopoulos are the link between the campaign and WikiLeaks and the Russians. So Stone that would be significant, but it would not be new to some degree. You know, Stone's bragging about his relationship to Assange was sort of central to this.
Yep.
The only difference would be he'd now be indicted for it. Let me say one other thing about the questions to the president.
Yep.
I wonder if the reason why Mueller is going to questions to the president rather than a grand jury subpoena is that he simply does not want to be litigating the subpoena issue all the way to the Supreme Court, given the vagaries of the Supreme Court right now. In other words, getting questions, at least getting something, as opposed to doing what any other prosecutor would have done, which is a grand jury subpoena.
Yeah, they have played out the string on this, Giuliani and the president's legal team, so far. It appears successfully, right? I mean, they haven't given him anything yet. We will see what the next chapter brings. But there's also this news today, Harry. And again, there's a lot when you're sitting and looking at the president's legal.
Just another Friday.
It's really remarkable, right? So you got Credico down there. Of course, he doesn't show up. Papadopoulos pleads. Right. We got this too. Manafort weighing plea deal to avoid new criminal trial, source says. Also, this is a Bloomberg scoop. This is also, I should note, single-sourced, I believe. The idea that in between trials 1 and 2, Manafort may be talking to Mueller about possibly cooperating. What do you make of that?
You know, it came up before, right? There was a flirtation with it about a week or 10 days ago. What I most likely make of it, he has stayed quiet so long, is that he is broke and knows he's going to be convicted in D.C. In other words, I think the cooperation he is looking to make is just to surrender, let him take him, but not this sort of full-on cooperation that would vitiate any odds he has of a pardon. So I think it's just to lay down his hand and let the sentences come.
Let me ask you
cooperate.
Yeah.
You mean cooperate just to plead? Is that what you're saying? Cooperate
Yeah, that would be
to the
my
extent
best
of
guess,
pleading
Judge,
and
is that
surrendering?
he's just looking,
Cutting his
avoids
losses,
all the
essentially.
cost of it up
Yeah.
trial, which is enormous.
Let me ask you this,
My
Nancy.
best guess.
Nancy, because we have Jerome Corsi today, who is a figure who is circled in different orbits in conservative world. He was quite mainstream when he authored the Swift Boat book against John Kerry, which is part of George W. Bush's defeat of him. He's also a conspiracy theorist par excellence, says all sorts of nutty things, an associate of Roger Stone. He just doesn't show up to a subpoena today. He's now the second associate of Roger Stone who's done that. Andrew Miller is another one. And a third, Sam Nunberg, balked at showing up. What does a judge do when someone like Jerome Corsi just says, screw your subpoena?
The government comes to the judge who's supervising the grand jury and asks for a contempt finding and an arrest warrant. That's what they would do.
Do you think?
In other words, that's not even a close question.
And you think they
You
will
don't say never mind.
Yeah, they will do that here.
I don't think that there's any question about whether they would do that.
So that's
I mean,
interesting.
Harry, would you think wouldn't the government go for that? I mean, you basically
I
set
see your
up
point. It depends.
civil
And
disobedience.
It's super cheeky, but he's already been in touch with the lawyer. I can foresee scenarios where they, say he'll be in Tuesday where he thinks he has bigger fish to fry.
That's
but I've certainly seen the government do exactly that.
Here, final question here on this idea that there was this question, right? When Michael Cohen pleads, one of the things he pleads to is a campaign finance violation. He says the President of the United States directed me to it, and in the information provided with that plea, there are two executives that are not named, but two executives of Trump work who knew about it. We understand one of them is Alan Weisselberg, who has been granted immunity, according to reports, by Mueller for his testimony in the Michael Cohen case. Today, the idea that the Southern District of New York, Harry, is looking at campaign violations by Trump Oregon executives, you would tend to zero in on whoever executive number 2 is, and it's a small list of people, most of them related to the president.
Yeah, and Mueller knows, and we can figure it out, but not just related to the president. The organization is related to the president.
Right.
This really puts the screws to him in a serious way without having to deal with the thorny questions of criminal liability. If between Mueller and SDNY and New York DA and New York AG, they're coming at the financial empire, possible civil RICO charges, et cetera, that's serious pressure, even though it's not criminal.
All right, Nancy Gertner.
And that persists regardless of what happens to Mueller.
That's exactly right. In parallel right now, which is part of the significance, I think, of that report today. It didn't end with Michael Cohen, and you've got SDNY still on the case. Got to make you think long and hard as you're sitting there during executive time in the East Wing. Nancy Gertner and Harry Litman, great to have you both. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.